Welcome everyone to our first joint program with Go South, which is an organization started by two Yale students who were the first fellows of YANA. And for those joining us for the first time and don't know about YANA, we are the Yale Alumni Nonprofit Alliance. We are an independent 501c3 organization. We're officially a shared interest group from the alumni group out of Yale University, but we are open to all. And our mission is to really support, encourage, educate, and provide resources and community to everyone who's in the social impact space. Go South is our first fiscally sponsored organization and project. They are mission aligned with us. We're delighted to have been with them since the beginning and just so happy and proud of them to be where they are now. And they are hosting their first program, Building Movements from the Margins, How Movement and Nonprofit Work for Social Justice Continue in the Face of Disenfranchisement. So I will say goodbye. I'm going to hang out in the background. I'm going to pass the microphone on to Paola, who will introduce herself and the panelists and tell you a little bit about Go South. So thank you for joining us and thank you for supporting Go South.
Yes, so hi everyone. My name is Paola Jimenez-Read. And before we start, it would be great if everyone could actually introduce themselves in the chat, just like name, pronouns, and like what brings you here today. But yeah, like I said, I'm Paola and I am a rising senior at Yale in Timothy Dwight College, and I'm majoring in political science. I am, like Rachel just said, I'm one of the fellows with Go South. And I'll also give like a brief introduction for Go South. Go South was founded in the fall of 2016 by 3 Yale undergraduates. And it is a nonprofit that invests in work advancing justice and equity in the South by placing Yale students in capacity building roles in nonprofits in our host cities, which in the past it's mainly been Savannah, Georgia, and we were also last summer hosted in West Virginia. Since our first summer in 2018, we have placed 22 fellows at over a dozen different nonprofits in Savannah and Charleston. And we are extremely excited to welcome everyone to our first Zoom webinar. Today, we are going to be joined by 3 wonderful speakers, Allegra Lawrence Hardy, Pastor Kenneth Glasgow, who I think we're still waiting for, so we'll see about that, and also Irvin Camacho. And I'll give some brief introductions for our 3 speakers. So first, Allegra Lawrence Hardy is was Yale Law School class of '96. She is a lead counsel on Fair Fight Action versus Raffensperger, a federal lawsuit challenging Georgia's elections policies that disproportionately have impacted voters of color. And she is also a founding partner of Lawrence and Bundy. Pastor Kenneth Glasgow is the founder and president of the Ordinary People Society. He is also an advocate for harm reduction, prison reform, and the restoration of rights and opportunities for formerly incarcerated people. And last but not least, we have Irvin Camacho, who is an immigrant rights and community organizer in Arkansas. Irvin is a bail disruptor with the Bail Project, a board member of the ACLU of Arkansas, and an organizer with the Immigrant Defense Team, which is a youth-led organization that empowers and educates immigrant communities in Arkansas. So I'm extremely excited to welcome these 3 speakers. Well, at least for now 2, but we're just gonna be hoping that Pastor Glasgow gets here very soon. And yes, so to also introduce and I guess re-mention the event description, this will be a panel discussion, and at the end of the panel, we're going to leave about 15 minutes for audience questions. So make sure that throughout the event, while we're talking, if you have any questions, make sure you just put them in the chat, and we're going to have a team member that's like in the chat. It's going to pull questions so that we can ask them in the last 15 minutes. So please make sure that you put any of those that you may have out there. Yeah. So. First. Michelle, should I go on, or are we going to give a couple minutes for Pastor Kenneth?
Yeah, he has the Zoom link. Olivia just texted him. Why don't we go ahead and get started? And hopefully he'll be able to join in just a second.
Okay, give me 1 second. I seem to be having an issue with my audio as well. Sorry.
We can hear you fine, Paula.
You guys can hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Okay, so sorry, Michelle, I didn't hear the last part of what you said. Should we wait a couple minutes or should I just go forward?
Yeah, I think we can go ahead and get started. Pastor Kenneth has the link, so he should be joining in just a second. But yeah, don't want to hold us up for too long.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so for my first question, either of you guys can answer it first. Don't be shy. But I just wanted to ask, how did you guys come to your work? As in, like, what were the personal and professional experiences, like, throughout your life in school or anything like that, that kind of led you to where you are right now? Yes, Allegra.
Irvin, would you like to start?
You're good.
First of all, thank you so much for this conversation. And thank you, Go South, for the amazing work and for investing in the South, which is just so very important for our entire country, as reflected by so many things, including everything that's happened in the political process over the last year, where the South played a very important role. I would say that for me, my time at Yale actually was quite determinative of my real interest in these areas. So I grew up in Southwest Atlanta, which is this incredible magical space for a little African-American girl to grow up in. I had no idea how rare and special it was at the time, but I grew up in a community of African-American folks who were very community focused and who really committed to staying in the community and taking care of each other. And so as a result, every dentist, doctor, professional I ever had growing up was African American. Those were the people that it never crossed my mind that, you'll hear people say, well, I didn't need a Black doctor until X. It never crossed. I never met anyone but a Black doctor until I came to Yale for law school. Every professional I had ever had in my life had been African American. And so I always thought I could do any job I wanted to do because that's what I had seen. And then I went to Spelman College, more of the same, right, where people spent 4 years talking, we didn't call it Black Girl Magic then, but people spent a lot of time telling me I could do anything and telling me about the responsibilities I had. And then I got to Yale and started really understanding what it means to be Black and brown in America when you're not in this bubble that I had grown up in. And so living in New Haven really gave me an opportunity to become engaged on lots of different levels. But to just talk about the voting piece, I remember even just very early on at Yale becoming involved and really understanding the impact on the city and the state. And how the political power of the folks in New Haven when I was there, and I'm much older than our moderator, for example. I'm about to go to my 25th reunion, I think, and I know New Haven has changed a lot. But when I was there were lots and lots of concerns about the political strength of brown and Black voters in Connecticut and the lives that they lived as a result, and the ways that they were treated as a result. So I got very interested in that. I continued to be interested in it, and as I left law school and began practicing law, I had an opportunity to work on the Bush v. Gore case in 2000, and that was our big election law case, and I got the bug, and I have not let it go. I am sorry to say that it feels like deja vu all over again, lots of times. There are lots of things that continue to happen in our in the voting rights arena that one would think we would have moved on from by now. So I am grateful to be here tonight because I'm always excited to see, frankly, the next generation of freedom fighters coming along. And what I always say is we're just going to run the ball as hard and fast and long as we can. And I'm just so excited and look forward to handing it off to you all.
I guess I'll jump in next. Thank you all for the opportunity, for allowing me to be here. And this question is really special to me just because for me, I guess I have to go back to talking about acknowledging my privilege. I was born in this country, while a lot of the people that I know and that are very close to me were not. My dad came over here after my grandpa came over here in the mid 1900s. Whenever he came as a bracero, which was an immigrant worker from Mexico, that was brought over here by the US government. So my dad was able to come over here as a resident. My mom came undocumented, but a year after Reagan's amnesty happened, and she was able to become a resident too. So back when I was in high school, I used to do a Bulldog News, which was a television station in our high school. And I would always slip in immigrant stories in there, immigration stories, just to kind of keep our school base educated on immigrant issues. And this girl came up to me and said, hey, we actually have an organization that organizes immigrants here, and we just started. And if you want to come to a meeting at our house, then you're more than welcome to. And I did. I went to that meeting, which was back in 2009, and mostly everybody there was undocumented. And little things like not being able to get a driver's license, not being able to qualify for in-state tuition, little things like that are super big to a lot of people really made me acknowledge my privilege and say, you know what, I'm in a position where I don't have to fear getting stopped by police and deported. So I need to do something like with my life. I can't just live my own life okay while others suffer and others don't have the same opportunities that I have. So I think it was back then, when I was in high school, that I really thought to myself, I need to do more than what I'm doing. And I need to put myself in uncomfortable situations to be able to help other people that are less fortunate than me. And it just grew, from that point going forward. I never really stopped, and it just continues evolving, not only for immigrant issues now with the criminal justice system through the Bell Project. All this work evolves and intersects, and we're able to work with a lot of community members on different issues, whether it being LGBTQ+, Black Lives Matter, a lot of issues in our community that matter, that are important, and that we need to kind of work together as a community to be able to help level the playing field for everyone.
Thank you for answering. And I will real quick say Pastor Kenneth Glasgow has managed to join us. Hi.
Hey,
I just, good, yes. I'll pose the question again to you that we just had Allegra and Irvin answer, but so how did you come to this work, like the work you do, and like specifically, I guess, like what are the personal and professional experiences that have led to where you are now?
Ooh, how much time I got? All right, I'll condense it real short. I'm born Kenneth Sharpton, Al Sharpton's brother by blood. Me and him got the same father. Him and my mother got the same mother. A whole nother story. It was paused. Just put a pin in it. We'll get to that some other later time. Read the book. And so I was born into this activism world by default, so to speak. And I became sort of like the shadow or rebel of the family, black sheep of the family, and kept getting in trouble and this and that and the other and all that. So we changed my name from Sharpton to Glasgow. I ended up getting on crack cocaine, doing 14 years in prison in Florida State Prison. And so while I was there, I had an epiphany from God in 1994 to start a criminal justice organization. All the rest of the organizations were all civil rights organizations, but there was no criminal justice organization for prisoners' rights and criminal justice. And it was up and coming because mass incarceration was just increasing. We would see grandfathers, fathers, and then sons in the same prison setting in 1980s and 1990s, which increased more than it ever had before the 2000s. 2001, I wasn't supposed to ever get out. 2001, I miraculously got out after having the epiphany 7 years earlier. And we had invented what's called TOPS, the Ordinary People Ministry at first, Top M. And then we changed it from Top M to TOPS, the Ordinary People Society, because we wanted to change society and not just do a ministry like Jesus, because Jesus' ministry actually changed society. Believe it or not, I was over the Muslims. I was minister for the Muslims for 7 years before even coming to this, but I went back to Christianity because that was my upbringing and all that. That's what got me really into the work. I was born into it and all that, to speed the process up. I got out, wanted to get my voting rights and go vote, and they wouldn't let me vote. I got mad as hell. So I said, okay, I got y'all. I'm going to make sure everybody I know can vote. And the first thing I did was go look for people who could vote that had charges but wasn't convicted. And I thought about, what about the people in jail? So I started the jail vote in 2001, this and that and the other. It caught on fire, as you see now. It didn't really escalate to like 2012, 2011. But in 2008, I won a lawsuit to where they could vote out of prison in Alabama, depending on what their crime was, if it wasn't a violent crime, because their constitution for 160 years was taking people's voting rights that should have never been taken. And that existed not only in Alabama, but in all 9 of the succession states that kept slavery going and caused the Civil War after that. So we just got it in Mississippi also. But that's what got me really involved into the work when I came out, and we wasn't being fair, treated fair, equal. That's why I got a problem when people say returning citizens. Because here in the South, in these 9 successive states, we're still not considered citizens when we get out, until we get our voting rights. There's 2 things that declare you a citizen: your birth certificate, and then they take it away from you when you get a felony with your voting rights, because you're not declared a citizen, a full citizen. You go back to the 3/5 mantra that they used in slavery once you lose your voting rights. So that's what got me into the work. That's what I've been doing. Been very effective. And those of you that been doing this work a while, like I have over 20 and 30 years, 27 years like we have, you know that when you become effective in the voting apparatus and the political spectrum, they target you. The government is coming, the FBI, the IRS, DEA, and everybody else. And so that's what, we've been under fire with a capital murder charge I should have never had, because I was taking the guy at my transition house, dropped him off. He killed a person, and then they tried to get me for complicity. They dropped that after 3 years. And then now here they come with some fictitious federal charge, all kind of stuff that haven't come out yet, but it's coming. And, so that's what ends up happening. They did it to Martin Luther King, did it to Malcolm X, did to all of our leaders. So one of the things I want to highlight before I end this introduction is the point that set up all your precautions on what you're getting into. I looked at this and studied this in the last 27 years. And when you become really, really effective, they come for you, because you have came for them. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you also, Allegra and Irvin, for sharing your answers to the question. I guess like my follow-up question, which I think some of you guys kind of touched on a little bit already, is so like obviously each of you have been like leaders in advising your like respective causes, inequity and justice in your communities. And you guys all kind of employ like slightly different strategies. So I guess I was wondering, can you guys briefly share your personal theory of change and how you feel like is the most effective strategy to, I guess, like leading like positive and like structural institutional change in that way? Irvin, can you go first? Thank you.
Sure thing. So for me, I think what's been most effective is meeting people where they're at. I feel that there's people that are at different levels of understanding different systems, whether it being the voting system, whether it being the criminal justice system. And you really have to learn to be patient and meet people where they're at, even if it's like every person is at a different level, is at a different location, is at a different just level of understanding. A lot of people don't want to do that because it takes a lot of work, but I've realized that it has been really effective for me in being able to teach people, how to register to vote, or also just there's folks that I encounter in my everyday job that, get in trouble with the law for the first time, and they need help navigating the system. They need help reaching out to their probation officer. So I think just the core idea for me and how I organize is simply that. And I think that's as simple as I can put it, just meeting people where they're at.
Pastor Kenneth, do you want to give your answer?
I have to totally agree with him. You have to meet people where they're at. We extend, we feed about 300 people a day. And I named it after my mother, Mama Tina's Mission House. And one of the things, I just did a big essay, or whatever you want to call it, on systemic racism. It's on Facebook. Something about 3,000 people shares and all that. And talking about how they went from, no prisons to after they came with the 13th Amendment to where they implemented the prisons, implemented the black codes and all that, so they could get people under convict leasing to get them back up under the 13th Amendment in slavery under that new law, new code or whatever, and how it extends to what we're going through now. You have to read it on my Facebook page, PAS, Kenneth Sharp in Glasgow. But what he's saying is exactly right, because we use two dynamics in our organizing. One is, of course, what he's saying, meeting people where we at, and we call people experts by their experience. So when a lot of people feel like they don't have the technical capabilities or savvy or whatever, when people feel like they don't have the speaking capabilities to be prolific or articulate or whatever, what about your experience? Let's go with your testimony, right? And being that we, faith-based, we definitely want to throw in the Bible, Revelation 12 and 11, so you overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of your testimony. So we get people to understand that their experience make them an expert in that experience. So that's how we meet them, and we also encourage them, to be who they are and to advocate for others who have went through the same and similar thing. The other aspect that we do and motivating people is we want you to recognize your interests. What is your interest? And most of us, even in voting or even in picking something in the supermarket or whatever, people don't realize people have to be called on what's their interest, or at least acknowledge what their interest is, so that way it can activate them or push them in a different way psychologically into their psyche. So those are the ways we use, similar to what he's saying. We do it a lot by food. We do it a lot by your experience. We do it a lot by people that have the same experiences and all. And, last but not least, we also do by your emotionalism. And what I mean by that is we'll say that we have what's called BA, Ballers Anonymous, where we got, people that used to sell drugs and this and that and the other, that'll meet with the kids of the parents that they're selling drugs to. And one of the most phenomenal things that we ever had was a 12-year-old girl confronting a guy who come to a mother house and selling drugs and tell her, "You the reason I don't have clothes to wear to school. You the reason my mama sold you the TV. You the reason my mama took the game that my little brother had, this and that and the other." And it causes them to start giving back to their community. So we call it happened by mishaps. It had to be God. It wasn't me. I ain't got that much sense. But it happened by mishaps. But then they started what's called community accountability amongst themselves.
And I'll just add, obviously, agree with everything that's been said. And I would just say that for me, really 3 points that I tend to come back to as my center. The first is really recognizing the inescapable web of mutuality that Dr. King talks about, that we're all in, right? And so that, oftentimes, particularly, frankly, lawyers get taught that it's all about contributing and, donating services. And what we really try to focus on is recognizing that we help others to help ourselves, right? Like that protecting voting rights is important for every single person, whether or not I personally am at risk of being disenfranchised. The importance of what comes out of voting rights, right? Gun control, education, ways to address poverty, healthcare, all of the really incredible things that we can do at the ballot box affects every single one of us. So we really see the web of mutuality and see it less as sort of helping others, more as all of us helping ourselves, right? Because we're all doing it together, we're all in it together. The second point I would just say is remembering that regardless of our situation, we are never powerless. And there's no moment where that was more true than it is today because of the democratization of communications with social media, right? So when Pastor Glasgow can get his essay up there and 3,000 people have already consumed that, right? 10 years ago, you would have had to wait for somebody to publish that for you, right? So for me, what has been so exciting, I'm not even a sports fan, but I have spent the last few days cheering on Simone Biles, and to watch all of Black Twitter stand up and embrace her and sort of say, we dare you to say something bad about Simone Biles, to really see that shift in the dynamic, right? Because power really is in all sorts of places that we don't expect it. And so realizing, I've had many conversations where people have said, I wish I could do something, but I don't feel like I have the power. What they really normally mean is they don't have the title. But what we've learned is that if you really just want to see the work done, the title really doesn't matter, right? And that we can all work together from wherever we are situated to see change made. And then the third thing for me that's been the most exciting and inspiring part is when I finally realized I didn't have to have all the answers, right? So one of the things we're taught, as lawyers, is to sort of figure out how to be the person in the room who's the authority. And it's pretty exciting. One of the things that really has been fun for me is when I started realizing, actually, the people who have come to us sometimes have a really good idea for what they need to see happen, right? There are people in the movement who have been experiencing whatever this issue is, right? Then I may have a theoretical understanding of it, but they may have really good ideas, really good suggestions. They may not be organizers by title, right? Back to the title thing. They may not have, have that job, but they may have been organizing their community since they were children. And so really recognizing that, again, the titles don't matter, that we don't have to be in charge of everything, that we're always learning and listening has really been empowering for me.
Well, we need to get you to talk to a whole bunch of lawyers. I got a whole bunch of lawyers I want you to talk to. I like you.
Anytime, Pastor, anytime.
Okay, so kind of shifting slightly, and Allegra, I think, touched on this at the very beginning. So you guys are all based in the South. Your work is very Southern focused. And we have seen how the South has long been at the forefront of social justice and civil rights movements. So I was wondering, how do you guys take that kind of history or take that history and let it inform your work? And also, how do you situate your work and the work of your organizations within that legacy that we have seen here?
Wow, that's good. Do you want me to go first?
Go for it.
So I'm over now Selma Jubilee, and we do that, and that's the Bloody Sunday we do in Selma, crossing the Selma Bridge every year. Been over it for since 2007, I believe, and been more prominent with it the last 10 years. We were very, very instrumental, and you'll love this, my brother, with HB 56, because we were able to migrate ourselves with all those who they call immigrants and aliens to diminish and demolish them, calling them immigrants and aliens. And we used the whole theory, aspect, action, and everything that we used in the civil rights movement to collaborate with them to fight HB 56 in Alabama when it came out. So when the rallies became, we helped them construct and conduct all the rallies and everything else, and we used that same perspective. We also used that perspective and what we do now, Usher Brown and Planners and all that from 21st century, because we got Rose Sanders and all them who are actually the ones that were there during this time to help us keep intact on what they did then. The only problem is the social media, like she just alluded to, but we do have some of the records that is right there in Selma and some of the strategies from what they did in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the youth and you know with Martin Luther King and all of them. And so we've been able to use that effectively now, bringing it into the 21st century, into what's happening now, and implement it into what's going on with the mass incarceration and into the criminal justice work and the immigration work. The problem is that we've been able to implement it so good is because guess what? And I know y'all gonna all laugh when I say this. We meeting up with the same goddamn problems. The same. So it's like, is history repeating itself? Yeah. Why? Why are we still dealing with the same issues that they dealt with then? Why are we going back when we got the Civil Rights Act in 1964, got the Voting Rights Act in 1965, and we still having to fight these same things. So what didn't they do? Who did they leave out? Did they leave out the immigrants? Yeah. Did they leave out those that got felony convictions? Yeah. Did we leave out the women? Yeah. You know, was it misogynistic? Yeah. So now we're using that, and I want y'all to hear me clearly, as a model and a logistic model, but we're also using it not only as a model to follow, but a model to see where it messed up at and why we're going back through this again. And in doing so, we're having to look at, was it misogynistic? What was happening with the women then? Did they have a stronger voice? Even though they used Rosa Parks, was that voice still strong as it should be? No. Okay. Did we have the immigrants and everybody included or not? No. Did we have those that are formerly incarcerated or currently incarcerated in prisons and all this? No. Did we foresee all this when we went for, you know, we didn't even foresee mass incarceration. We was working on affirmative action. We got President Obama, got the highest office in America, but we got more black men in prison than we ever had in chattel slavery. So we use that to look at not only its goodness, not only how it works, but how can we make it better in this day and time? Yeah. Yeah.
Allegra, you can go next.
I mean, Pastor kind of dropped the mic on that. I'm not sure where to go. I will say that, you know, it's one of the most inspiring things about living here in the South is that we have both these historical figures, right? And I, you know, one of my mentors, Mayor Shirley Franklin, oftentimes will say, you know, you think you're tired, how do you think Harriet Tubman felt? And I'm always like, yeah, like when she got ready to do her 8th journey, she must have been exhausted, right? And so we have those types of figures, of course, Congressman Lewis, who we've lost, et cetera, et cetera. But we also have the figures we still run into at the grocery store, like Mayor Shirley Franklin, like, I mean, so many of them who are just, you know, out and about and walking around in the South, still making change. And then, of course, we have all of our new generation of leaders. And so I would say absolutely they serve as sources of inspiration. And, Irvin started by acknowledging his privilege. And I think this is one of our greatest privileges in the South, is that we do really walk in tremendous footsteps. And as difficult as it is, and Pastor, you really said it when you said it's the same problems. I mean, that we, so many of the issues that we're facing, you just can't even believe we're still talking about them, particularly from my perspective in the voting rights space. We have stories that we have collected in our litigation where people will come in and talk about their grandfather who used to, put away every paycheck, a nickel in the jar. They had a jar like in their kitchen, so that he would put it away every time, so that when it came time to pay the poll tax so he could vote, they'd have the money. Talk about how they would never eat meat on Sundays because instead that was the day they saved. Right, they would have a meatless dinner to make sure they had enough money. To talk about all the things that their ancestors did to vote, and then they would come in and tell us, and I didn't get to vote. Right, so all this privilege now, this many generations later, people who have had so many things happen that are much better and easier than it was for a grandfather or a great grandfather, but who are still having the same fundamental issues. And so, as much as we know that many of these issues are being repeated, we're also inspired, right? And we know, I am encouraged and, here for the work, because the only thing we can do is just stay strong and committed, and really encouraged by the history of those who have come before us.
In Arkansas, we have such a interesting dynamic because when we started organizing back in 2009, I think that was like the beginning of organizing just for the undocumented community / immigrant community here in Arkansas. We didn't really have anybody whose blueprint we could follow, and see like, okay, I should do this or I shouldn't do this. We didn't have that. So we were kind of creating the blueprint. And, but we did, in our history, we did look back at like the Little Rock Nine, and that was a big inspiration for us. Just seeing people that were young, that were that strong, that were that brave, was inspiration for us, because we were 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds organizing a community, and people didn't take us seriously. I remember back then we would do sit-ins in senator's office. We would do rallies outside of congressman's office. And we were seen as radical, and nowadays it's not really seen as radical. Everybody goes to protests, everybody goes to rallies, and it's like kind of like a cool thing now to do, right? But back then we were kind of, we had our age against us. What we were doing was seen as radical, so we weren't getting a lot of support from like the Caucasian community, just because they saw us more as problematic than trying to do something positive. But it was something positive. We didn't want in-state tuition for our undocumented community. We wanted folks to not have to fear and stay in the shadows because of their immigration status. And we have as immigrant organizers, I think we have a really complicated, specifically young immigrant organizers, we have a really complicated relationship with older folks in our community that organize, because we all have different ways of organizing. And sometimes that can become a problem. When you think of immigrant organizing, you think of Cesar Chavez a lot, right? You think about him organizing immigrant workers. But one of the things that we don't talk about is that, he was anti-undocumented immigrant in his work. He would do interviews where he would talk about how undocumented immigrants would come from Mexico and fortunately ruin his plans to organize in California because they would work for less. So our organizing and our leaders it's always been complicated organizing within ourselves. But I think, starting in 2009, those of us that came together realized that we didn't have to have one leader. We could all be equals and do the work. And ultimately, be effective that way. And that's what we did. And I think, you know, nowadays I organize with people that are way younger than me, and you have to allow folks to, you know, to do those TV interviews, to get on the platform themselves and be the voice of the communities, and not allow gatekeeping to happen and to suppress movements in our areas.
Those are some really great and interesting answers. Thank you, guys. So this is going to be one of my last questions or so. So make sure, like I said at the beginning, everybody to submit any questions that you may have in the chat. But my last question for you guys is, what kind of advice do you have for young people, whether they're in college or recent graduates who are hoping to enact positive change in their communities? And this can be like specific to the South or not, but yeah, what advice do you guys have?
Woo. All right, y'all want me to go first or last? Huh?
I would say, Pastor Kenneth, you're good.
Okay. So I go through this on a daily basis. My wife is 38 years old. I'm 56. Been doing this 27 years. She's been doing it for 15 years. And she constantly argues with me because what he just mentioned, we go through a lot. And that's the older advocates, like versus the newer advocates or younger advocates. And we see things from different perspectives. And even to the point where we got into a real intense argument, because she said, we don't give a god dog what y'all did 20 years ago. We talk about what the hell we got to do now. And I got totally mad. I mean, I was totally upset with her for saying that, right? You negating all the work we did and overlooking the history and yada, 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 yada. Well, here 5 years later, she's like, you know what? I might need to reconsider the way I said that, because if I learned all that history and stuff, it could have prevented me from going through a lot of wheel turning and stuff that I did. My advice to younger advocates is to learn, first of all, you got to find your lane and stay there. The only time we have accidents in our traffic or in our drive is when people do an improper lane change. Find your niche. What's your lane? What are you good at? Everybody can't be the speaker. Everybody can't be the pastor. Everybody can't be the policy analyst. Everybody can't be the advocate. Everybody, you know, it got to be, it's a machine. Find your lane and stay there. Because that's where you're going to become effective at and effective at once you find your niche in this movement. But if everybody want to be up top and be the title and everything like she alluded to earlier and all that, then guess what? We start diminishing our own work. One of the biggest reasons that the oppressors and Republicans beat us is because, I don't care if it's Sean Hannity or Glenn Beck in the Eiffel Tower in New York or Redneck in the Clay Hills of Alabama, where I'm at, they got the same message. They got the same strategy. We don't do that because we don't all want to stay in our own lane. We want to all be on top and this and that and the other. So my advice to younger advocates is find your lane and stay there. The second thing I would advise them is learn what happened in the history of it. Even if you don't like the person, don't want nothing to do with the person, don't get off into the person and the personality. Get off into the issue and what has happened pertaining to the issue and to the cause that you're fighting. Learn the history of what has happened in that cause. Learn the history of what has happened in that issue. So you won't have to repeat it, but you can add to. This is not a 1.4 meter race. This is a relay race where we all have to pass the baton. The third thing I would say to younger advocates is always respect the advocacy. And that's not just the advocacy of older folks, mature folks and folks that's been in it, but that's the advocacy of each other. If we could change all of our perspectives from being humanity to humanity, did y'all catch what I said? If we could change our whole perspectives from humanity and just coexisting with each other, respecting each other in our own lanes and this, to humanity, to where what hurts you hurt me. Your pain, my pain. When you cry, I cry. What you do affects me. That's the difference in humanity and humanity. If we could all get to that point, oh my God. Then we will start making the changes we need from a total different perspective of equality and all that. Because all fairness ain't equality. I'll stop right there.
The advice that I can give is that you're never too young to get involved. Even though there will be people that will tell you or tell someone else that you're too young, that your mind is, maybe not as ready to lead a movement or to be a part of a movement, you are like, I feel like anybody can contribute something. For example, right now with the people that I organize with the immigrant defense team, most of the organizers are 20, 21 years old, and I'm learning so much from them. There's a lot of things that I wouldn't even think of, or ways to approach certain issues. And you can just learn from everybody. It doesn't matter what age they are. I ran for office when I was 24. And when I started organizing, I was 17. People were saying that I was young then. When I ran for office, I was young. Now I'm 29, about to turn 30 next year. And people still say that I'm too young to be doing the stuff that I'm doing. But ultimately, I feel like we can all contribute something. So you shouldn't tell yourself, oh, because I'm this age or because I'm this inexperienced, I'm not going to be able to contribute something to this movement or something that I'm passionate about. Just find something, find something that you're passionate about, get involved, and I'm pretty sure you're going to contribute something positive and impactful to any movement.
All good advice. I'll just add two things. First, I would say that whatever intellectual curiosity had you join this Zoom at 6:30 on a Thursday night when you've been on Zooms all week, keep that intellectual curiosity. Make the decision to be a lifelong learner. Decide right now that you'll always be this interested and this open and this eager to hear other perspectives. Because I think that one of the things that can happen is that we do get so caught up in the work and in working so hard that we forget to really hear from other people and hear the other perspectives. So I think the intellectual curiosity is so important for the learning and frankly for the energy, for keeping energized in the fight. And then my second one is along these same lines. Audre Lorde teaches us that self-care is an act of political warfare. And this is something that everyone in the movement, let me say this, it's rare for me to meet someone in the movement who's really good at it. And the reason is we're so committed to the work, right? We're so committed to the work and we want to leave it all in the field. We know how important the work is. And we know that every single bit of effort, all of our blood, sweat, and tears pay off because we put so much into it. But I just want to remind us, there are many people who would be delighted if there were a few fewer people fighting for justice in America, right? And so if we aren't taking care of ourselves and really making sure that there's a process for ensuring the long-term viability of our individual warriors so that we're not having people burned out and fatigued and falling apart just when we need them the most. So I encourage everyone, I love the Audre Lorde quote reminding us that is the political warfare. Keeping ourselves ready for this journey is part of our job, and making sure that we are doing it for each other, looking out for each other, caring for each other, so that we're all there to stay ready for the journey is a really important part of the work.
Thank you for giving your advice and also just being here today. That kind of wraps up all my questions. So I don't know if the audience has any questions that they would like to share. Like I said, make sure you put them in the chat or in the like little Q&A thing that's found at the bottom.
Hey, Paula, it's Rachel. Can I jump into the question?
Yeah, sure.
I'm just curious to know. I mean, I'm learning a lot more about the South, and I'm glad we've got folks on the call. What are some of the differences between maybe how things are organized in the South and in the North? I mean, it sounds like Allegra, you had an experience, and then you came up and said, "Oh, it's different up here, maybe," or at least the community you were in. So, what can folks, or those of us, people who live in the Northeast, take, learn, and I'm just curious to know what's going on in the various movements geographically. And what can we learn from each other?
So I'll go first again. One of the biggest things that I do across the country when I'm teaching people the toolkit and training and going inside jails to register people to vote, this and that and the other, and all pastors across the country, is I try to tell them that there's a big difference in the Southern advocate and the Northern advocate. And it's mainly because of the resources. And when I say that, they automatically equate it to money, which there hasn't been any resources in the South. Funders and all that just started really actually giving funding to the South. But that's not what I'm holistically talking about. When I'm talking about the resources in the South, and I'm quite sure the others agree with me, is relationships, man. Relationships. In the North, you could work back deals and deal with lawmakers and politicians and all in a totally different perspective than you can in the South because of their relationships. You have to deal with the bureaucracy up there up north, true enough, but here you have to deal directly with their relationships. You got a brother, sisters, uncles, nephew, cousin on the daddy's side that don't like the bill you presented to the lawmaking, and because it's his wife Kim folks, it's not going to happen. We talking about the deep South. The other side of that is not only about the racism, it's about here, it's about the control of the white supremacy. Oh, and I know y'all want to ask me, well, what's the difference? It's a hell of a difference. I'm gonna leave that for the lawyer to explain to you. Might be explain because I'm gonna get real graphic if I explain it to you. So that's the big difference. The South, the North, you're a lot more progressive. In California, you're a lot more progressive. Northeast. If I talk to my brother, tell him going on here in Alabama, he's like, what the hell? It's crazy because we're still dealing with the residue of Jim Crow and the residue of slavery and all that, even though to y'all up north, it don't exist. We see it. Prime example, and I'll end with this. I'm trying not to cry. Prime example, I end with this. When someone is locked up in prison in the North, they're behind a wall, a building, a wall. When someone is locked up in prison in the South, on the south of the border, North of South Carolina right there, they're out there in the field with a man on a horse, with a shotgun, and still in chains. So if you want to know the difference in the advocacy, just imagine that, see that, and that right there alone should give you a mere picture of the difference. Sorry for getting emotional. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Pastor Kenneth. I really appreciate it. Take as much time as you need. But Irvin and Allegra, do either of you guys want to jump in?
I'll just say that one of the things that voting rights lawyers always say is that they like to bring their cases in the South because, there are lots of places across the country where vote suppression exists, but in the South, it's in such stark terms that it becomes a little bit easier to really look at the strategies that are being used. And a lot of that has to do, of course, with our history, with the way in which we live in still very segregated communities, although obviously there are places in the North that are also extraordinarily segregated. I will never forget my first summer living in Boston. So again, I was from a place where the Klan marched pretty routinely when I was growing up in Atlanta. They used to march in a place called Stone Mountain, Georgia, and my parents would take us to see them so that we understood what that was. And so I remember being in Boston and having being invited to someone's home and then someone else basically saying, you can't go to that neighborhood. It's like, well, what? What does that mean? That there would be a neighborhood where I would not be safe. I thought that in the North, that wasn't a problem. It's just different, right? It's just different. But so we see that fast forwarded, at least with regard to voting rights, and particularly, for example, in a year like this one, where you had very close election counts, that's where vote suppression rears itself, right? Where vote suppression doesn't work where there are wide differences. Where people try it is when there are very small margins, right? Because if you can just carve out a few here and there, you can affect a change. And so one of the things we did over the last year is really talk with folks across the country in states where this would be an issue, because we have such experience seeing these issues in the South and really helping, again, helping with very similar issues around the country that just aren't as readily observed because they're not in such stark contrast.
I think here in Arkansas specifically, we've always kind of been on the defensive, where if we're trying to pass a good bill, there's like 5 bills that are coming after our communities, and that's exhausting. The people that are in elected office here really are trying to make our life more difficult. Arkansas is like the hot spot for COVID right now. Every county in our state is red right now because of COVID. The numbers keep on going up. I think today our governor announced 2,800 new cases in the last 24 hours. So our leadership, unfortunately, people that have been in leadership the past few years are always attacking our communities, and it is exhausting to kind of live like this, where we do hear of other parts in the country that, there are bad policies and bad elected officials everywhere, right? But in Arkansas, we're like drowning from them. There's a lot of people that are racist and openly racist, and because they're in the majority, all we can do is defend ourselves for the time being until we organize a little bit better and and get those bad people out of office.
Well, I want to be mindful of everyone's time, and I do see that it is 7:30. But first, before we close out, I just want to say that on behalf of YANA and Go South, we are appreciative of everyone here, panelists and audience alike. Thank you so much, Pastor Kenneth, Irvin, and Allegra, for coming to speak with us and share your perspective. I definitely know that I found everything you guys had to say very interesting. And from the comment section, I would say that some audience members agree. So I really appreciate it. And yes, thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you all for inviting us. Had a fun time.
Great time.
Man, thank you all so much. It was an honor. Thank you. And I need a lawyer, so I'm gonna call you.
Anytime, anytime.